So, with the usurping vizier out of the way, military commander Horemhab was at last in position to take the throne, as Tutankhamun had always wanted. And it raises a question. Why is Horemhab acknowledged as a legitimate pharaoh in the first place? Why does he appear in the Abydos king list when none of the pharaohs between him and Amenhotep III do? To start with, Horemhab was either of common birth or low-ranking nobility. It was during the Boy King's reign that Horemhab transitioned from simple soldier to politician. We first encounter him as Tutankhamun's foreign secretary of sort, where he's shown leading a diplomatic mission to Nubia, where the prince of a Nubian town came to Tutankhamun's court to represent his people. We know that Horemhab had Tutankhamun's favour. Despite his humble origins, he rose to become one of Tutankhamun's foremost advisors, and commander-in-chief of the pharaoh's army. One title that perhaps reveals a close, even friendly relationship with the king was fan-bearer of the king's right hand. As much as the title sounds servile to us, what it tells me is that the person given it was trusted to stand close to the pharaoh rather than kneel before him. It possibly denoted a bodyguard or personal assistant of some kind. Tutankhamun very likely needed some support with his mobility, and it's easy to imagine Horemhab being trusted to help the young king get about. It was also said that when Tutankhamun's temper was roused, only Horemhab could calm him. This loyalty was met with the ultimate reward. Knowing he was unlikely to sire offspring, Tutankhamun appointed Horemhab as crown prince and king's deputy, lending Horemhab not only the promise of future rulership, but a hand on the reins of power there and then. He was, at the time of the king's premature death, already Tutankhamun's intermediary. After Ai's brief reign, or possibly less brief reign, Horemhab resumed his rightful place. It probably didn't hurt his chances that even during Ai's reign, Horemhab had both the official command and full loyalty of Egypt's military. Horemhab had his own ideas about how to rule Egypt. He devolved power over the two kingdoms to regional rulers, one in Thebes and one in Memphis, and in his Great Edict, Horemhab declares that the abuses of power shown by recent pharaohs and their administrators were at an end.
His Majesty took counsel with his heart how he might expel evil and suppress corruption. The plans of His Majesty were a salvation, repelling violence and delivering the people from the oppressions which were among them. Behold, His Majesty spent all his days seeking the welfare of Egypt and searching out instances of oppression in the land.
Horemhab was wary of all instances of abuse of power, and his reforms stretched as far as the Amun priesthood, whose grasping had after all motivated Akhenaten to do away with the priests and their god to boot. His reforms weren't entirely what we might call honest. For one thing, he put priests in place who were formerly officers under him in the army, men who were personally loyal to him rather than those who could be relied upon to serve the gods and not their own ambitions. Even so, it did turn out to be a preventative measure for destabilizing the influence of the throne, if you think that's a good thing. Horemhab took a lot of credit for re-establishing the traditional order of things, but Ai and Tutankhamun, under Ai's advice, had already begun the de-Amanification process. That all being said, in fact quite a bit of the Amarna period survived Horemhab, and it was the kings of the next dynasty who began the true march of iconoclasm. Horemhab ruled for a while. 14 years is the usual conclusion, and the minimum estimate given, but his reign might have stretched as far as 27 or 28 years, depending upon how one reads and trusts certain documents. Evidence for a shorter reign comes from his tomb, which was incomplete at the time of his death, implying he died young and unexpectedly. But not to any certainty. The tomb was fully built, and it was only the burial chamber which was incompletely decorated. This was uncommon, but not unheard of. Amenhotep II's tomb wasn't complete when he died, and he'd reigned for almost 30 years himself. If either of Horemhab's known marriages were productive, none of his children outlived him, and so, not wishing to see Egypt pass forever and ever to childless kings, Horemhab selected a successor who already had not only children, but grandchildren. This new heir was one of Horemhab's soldier priests, a high priest of Set called Paramessu. And it is here that the 18th dynasty is finally cut off and a new one is recognized by later historians, as Paramessu takes the royal name Menpektire, though we know him today as Ramesses I. And it's here where I think we can answer one question: how is Horemhab an acknowledged pharaoh? simply because if he weren't, his elevation of Ramesses to the throne wouldn't really be legitimate. Ramesses and his dynasty were the ones who earnestly began to erode the history of the Amarna period, but they couldn't really have included Horemhab without including the founder of their own dynasty. Okay, that's a very cynical take. Maybe there was something more to it. Maybe Ramesses had a sense of honour and friendship, and that motivated him to keep Horemhab in the official list. But either way, that's the direction of our answer. In any case, so ended the greatest dynasty Egypt had seen to date. It had begun in righteous rebellion, a benighted people reclaiming their homeland, or so they later said. It peaked with an empire for its neighbours to look on and despair, but it ended in a sad sputter, ruined by strange political decisions and even stranger marital ones. Yet Horemhab had gone out of his way to set Egypt itself up to do what it had done so many times before, to work that sacred miracle that was the hope of all who lived upon the banks of the Nile, to raise itself from the dead, divine and eternal. Thanks for stopping by. So also ends my mighty 18th Dynasty series. If this is your first video in that series, there's a whole playlist of these things, going pharaoh by pharaoh, starting right at the founding of the dynasty. I don't know if I'll do another dynasty in the same way, but let me know if that's something you'd like to see. And as always, I'll be grateful if you'd like the video and share it about the place. The shrewd tacticians I'd strongly consider appointing to lead the restored cults of the old gods are my wonderful backers at patreon.com/armchairegypt. And one of you lucky sods is going to be pharaoh after me, so start sucking up now. Until next time, my fellow armchair Egyptologists, life, prosperity, and health to you all. Thanks for watching. Head over to my channel for more, or click here to see what the YouTube demons think you should watch next. I hope you'll consider subscribing. If you'd like to support and collaborate on the channel with me, go to patreon.com/armchairegypt. You can also join my Discord community, there's an invite link in the description.